Hello, everyone. This is James Nussbaumer, and I'm the author of The Master of Everything, a story of mankind in the world of illusion we call life. And the real purpose of this video is to announce its second book that it just came out called Mastering Your Own Spiritual Freedom, Lessons from A Course in Miracles. Both books are, and published by Ozark Mountain Publishing Company, a publisher that I'm proud to be with. And I've been getting several messages on Facebook and tweets and notification messages on Twitter, which I never thought that I'd be so avidly involved with both those social media sites, but I am, it seems to be. But someone had asked me, well, several people had asked me in different ways, but one person in particular, which I don't want to mention their name, had asked me if I would give my whole story here. That's already in my first book, The Master of Everything, of how I ran into A Course in Miracles. Usually I like to keep my videos at around 10 minutes or less, usually much less than that, but this is going to be quite longer than that. And I'd spoken with my publisher, and they said, yes, let's get this done. Let's do this. And by the way, welcome to my studio here. This is where I do all my writing. This is my office. It's a nice little loft in on a top floor of a big building in a small little town in Northeast Ohio, and the view is beautiful. There's a quaint, tranquil little river that runs through town that's full of trout, and it extends onward to other small towns down the road. It's just a beautiful place. This is where I get it done, right here. But the title of this blog explains my story, and it's called Already at Home. I just didn't know what to do. Have you ever been in a situation like that where you just didn't know what to do? While I was in prison for a foolish securities violation for 8 long years of a 10-year sentence, and as I became consumed in my writing, I always said to myself, of the people I needed to meet and sit and talk with would be the late Dolores Cannon, founder of Ozark Mountain Publishing Company, and also the late Wayne Dyer. Dolores had passed on only a few months after offering me a contract for my books while I was still in prison, and we had corresponded by old-fashioned U.S. mail at a time I was soon to be released but didn't know when. And then there's Wayne Dyer. Everyone loves Wayne. Wayne had passed on a few months just after my release from prison. The teachings of inner peace and forgiveness that I write about are based on the principles contained in A Course in Miracles. And there's not a single doubt in my mind that it was divinely intended that I be greeted by this publication. I wrote this book and many of its sequels, this book here and this sequel that's now published, but there's more on the way that are still under the editing process. But I'd written these books and its many sequels entirely by longhand, with pen and paper, in an overloud and overbearing prison environment with severely overcrowded conditions, and I would later arrange for the typing and editing. This project has saved me, especially this first book here, the second one to come out later, but all of my writing has saved me in more ways than one that I could ever explain. And as it grew, the light within me grew as well. Much of the world lives by a thought system that teaches us that our body is who we are, and that winning and losing are important. We think that in order for someone to gain, that someone else must lose. But much of the world struggles with one important question, and that is, who really am I? Sit quietly here for a moment and think about the world that you see. Tell yourself that the real world is not truly like this. It has no buildings, and there are no streets where people walk alone and separate and hurry home to hide. There are no stores where people buy an endless list of things they don't need. It's not lit with artificial light, and the night doesn't come in to end the day. There is no day that truly brightens in the morning and then grows dim later on. There is no loss of any kind. In the real world, everything shines and shines forever. The world you see must be denied because your sight of it and its thought system is costing you a different kind of vision. I mean that you cannot see both worlds because each of them involves a different kind of seeing and depends on what you cherish. The sight of one only is possible because you have denied the other. Both are not true, yet either one will seem as real to you as the amount of faith you hold dear to your heart. And what I mean is, their power is not the same because their real attraction to you is unequal. You know, we don't truly try. Excuse me. We don't, excuse me again, we don't truly try to make a world that we want, but somehow something makes us do that. And we don't truly want the world that we see because it has disappointed us since time began. The homes we have built never really shelter us. The roads we make really lead us nowhere. And no city that we build can withstand the crumbling assault of time. Everything we make merely has the mark of death and will ultimately perish. This aching world has no power to touch or alter the real world, yet the real world has the power to touch you even here in this world, built on time. You see, what we call with love will continue to us, but only when we are truly ready. Does all of this sound familiar for you experienced A Course in Miracles students? I hope it does. And for you people that are new to A Course in Miracles, I hope you think about this. But let me continue. All that we need to do in order to exchange this world for the real world is to have a willingness to learn that the world we made is false. But all of us in this distracted world from time to time have seen some glimpses of the real world about us. I mean, we have all noticed that divine reality within us, haven't we? But much of the time we procrastinate or shrug it off as daydreaming or our imagination running away with itself. But you see, while in this world, we'll always dream of peace before we awaken to it. While browsing the self-help section in a bookstore in Port Richey, Florida, back around 1995, I stumbled upon a book by Dr. Wayne W. Dyer called Your Erroneous Zones. I connected immediately as I stood there in the store, paging through it. His message was for me, I told myself. In the weeks and months ahead, I eventually purchased every one of Wayne Dyer's many books and absorbed every word as though it was intended specifically for me. Over time, I became a huge fan of Dr. Dyer, and I appreciated the fact that at one point in his own life, he had experienced a similar confusion, and he was able to discover the answer. Not only did I read and study all of his material, but also that of others Dr. Dyer had recommended. I was hearing them all loud and clear, but I still could not seem to budge. They were proving to me that the light was in the window. Like the window of my mind, the light was there, but I just could not seem to get the window shade up. I couldn't lift the window shade. It was blocking the window to my mind. It was obscuring the light. I was afraid, and I began more and more to force things and push everything, including my thinking. As I read Wayne Dyer and many of the other writers I respected, I often noticed that they on occasion referenced a publication called A Course in Miracles. What is this Course in Miracles? I would often ask myself and let it twirl in the back of my mind. And I would, of course, tell myself that I needed to check it out. One of these days, quote, I would say to myself. But it was totally unlike me to procrastinate on researching and seeking out this publication because I've never been a procrastinator. I was always the go-getter on top of things, never a procrastinator. But for some reason, I procrastinated on this. I had put the Course in Miracles, which I knew nothing about, I had put it on the back burner of my mind, so to speak. Again and again, I would hear mention of this publication, and I did nothing. Continuing to say, one of these days, I'll have to check it out. Well, by this time, My mind was so flooded with panic and turmoil that frustration was all I was about each minute of every day. In an effort to create capital to keep my dying business alive as a financial advisor of 25 years, I acted alone in crossing an illegal line within the financial services industry. I borrowed money from clients' accounts with the full intention of paying it back before anyone was the wiser. I went on to manipulate funds to get the sure stock market tip, where everyone would be a winner and I would be the hero. My thought system was a way to fix everything through various investments that had failed once before, but now were on the rise. A sure thing, I told myself. Well, you know the rest of the story. The plan failed and I had hit rock bottom. I was so busy searching for the hand of my own destiny, where all along, all I had to do was let go of that shaky, self-made thought system and let the real light shine inside of me. At age 50, I became a prisoner of the state of Ohio, and anything that could go wrong or go against me did. But I was willing to put up with it because something inside me was telling me that this has to be for a while anyway. Besides, I had no choice in the matter. As much pain as I was going through, the voice kept telling me that I was going somewhere, a voice inside of me, but it was more like pure thought. It wasn't a voice like actually hearing words and vocabulary and dialogue. It was pure thought that I call a voice. But the voice kept telling me that I was going somewhere and that I needed to simply hang on. On that cold morning of February 1st, 2007, I was transported in chains to Lorain Correctional Institution on the north coast of Ohio. I felt as exhausted and uncertain as ever before. But I hadn't lost the sense of the promising thoughts and expansive vision that had jolted me during my stay in the county jail that was telling me to just hang on. Things will be okay. I kept getting that pure thought, that voice. Lorain Prison would hold me for reception and intake processing for a period of 3 to 9 months while I was assigned a security level and waited for a spot in the overcrowded prison system. In that year alone, the state brought in around 30,000 new prisoners. For the time being, I would remain in maximum security, though I'd never been violent and posed an escape risk at all. But this meant to be locked in a cell 24/7, other than to shower twice a week and to march to the chow hall 3 times a day. After a buzz haircut and an issue of prison clothing, I was taken to prison house number 4, where I would spend the next few to several months. As I watched the guard slide a huge, huge key into the heavy steel door to house number 4 that had to be that thick and steel, my thoughts of what prison must be like just raced through me. And as I said to myself, while I was watching the guard stick the key into the door to bring me in with a few others along with me that were coming to that house as well, I said to myself, well, this is it. Excuse me again. I said, this is it. The guard forewarned me to follow him directly to my cell without looking at the other inmates waiting to harass me. As the guard slowly swung open the vault-type door, it almost looked like a vault-type door at a bank, a safe in a bank. But as he opened the door, blasts of insanely loud noise just surged through me, like almost throwing me backwards. I stepped into the prison house, which held 260 prisoners, all double bunked into single cells. I immediately noticed the high ceilings, which reminded me of an arena. The circular design featured 2 tiers called ranges that resembled a balcony going all the way around, and then all the way around the outer walls, and with a 2-bar railing separating down below, which they called the pit. And cells were lined up one after another with just chaotic, volatile noise, unbelievable. This was certainly a lion's den, I told myself, And I could see immediately that in order to survive, I would have to decide what kind of a lion I was going to have to be. This surely was not the place where the lion and the lamb would lie down together, I would tell myself. And I've always been good at, when chips are against me, to telling myself little one-liners to keep myself cheered up. So that was my little one-liner. I knew the lion and the lamb weren't going to lie down together here. But after 60 days, I was notified that I was being transferred to a medium security prison called Richland, which would only be an hour's drive for my adult daughters to visit their locked up father. But a few weeks later, on the morning of the transfer, the state changed their plans for me. Without notice, I was loaded onto an old rickety bus with about 50 other prisoners, handcuffed, shackled, and chained, interlocking arms with the person next to you like this, so no one could hijack the bus. Chained and interlocking arms, we were driven to Belmont Prison, over 3 hours away in the opposite direction. Belmont had a nasty reputation for gang activity and carried the nickname Gladiator School. I tried to contain my anger, my helplessness, and dread. When I arrived at Belmont, it was not what I expected, but really what is in life. Belmont certainly lived up to its reputation with gangs and gladiators. On my first day there, I counted 8 fights, resulting in each inmate being taken to the hole. Unlike Lorraine, there were no cells in the regular holding quarters, but rather rows of double-bunked beds, 30 inches apart from one another, double bunk after double bunk after double bunk, warehousing 272 prisoners to each house, squeezed tightly into 5 rows. Belmont has 8 of these prefabricated houses with tin roofs, totaling approximately 2,400 prisoners, and all of them had one thing in mind, which was survival. Being a medium security level prison for approximately 7 hours most days, prisoners are permitted to roam the prison yard, the gymnasium, and library. But these hours of the day, with all of the 8 houses intermingled, are a relentless test for one's survival. Following an 11-day confinement that I had spent in segregation, known as the hole, I was hit on the back of the head, and that's described in chapter 15 of The Master of Everything. But anyways, as I was lying on my bunk following 11 days in the hole, trying to recover, and by the way, while I was in the hole for that 11-day period, I had witnessed a murder in the cell next to me. And that's another story that you can read about in chapter 15. Like I said in this book, I tell about it in detail. But I was just exhausted after that 11 days in the hole. I mean, just emotionally, physically, mentally drained as you could ever imagine. So I was lying on my bunk trying to recover when a fire drill was enacted. The yard was open, so to avoid the fire drill proceedings, I quickly left the scene and found my way into the prison library, which was really not a part of the fire drill. I needed something, anything to lift the fog in my mind. The library has limited material. It's not like a library you would think in town at your local public library, which is wonderful in my town. It's not like that. Mostly old and used books and well-thumbed magazines and that are donated by local libraries that must unload their outdated material. A good find requires a tough search. And I continued to browse until I noticed Dr. Wayne W. Dyer's book called Real Magic. I had owned this book prior to prison, and it was one of my favorites of Wayne Dyer's. This was like an old friend out of the blue paying me a visit, a much-needed visit. I immediately checked the book out of the library for 2 weeks and held on closely to every single word, thankful for the boost. Upon returning Real Magic, I decided to search a section of philosophical type books, which had all been published years ago according to their copyright. And I just was starting to give up, thinking I was going to find anything that I could replace what I had just read from Wayne Dyer. An unusual, old-looking, battered, blue-covered book with faded gold lettering popped out at me. I casually pulled it off the shelf, and it fell to the floor. And It fell to the floor and it landed on my right foot. On my right foot, partially open to some torn and raggedy pages. As I bent over to pick it up, I noticed the gold lettering said, to my surprise, A Course in Miracles. Here is that book that I was able to somehow get out of the prison, and I'll explain that here in a little bit later. This is the worn one, the yellow stained inside. This would, and I had to get it all taped and everything, and you see my name written on the side with a black magic marker in case someone would steal it, because in prison, if they see that you cherish something, like I was hugging on to this thing like you would not believe, people know that, other inmates, even guards, they're going to steal it from you. So I borrowed a magic marker from a guard, and I wrote my name all over this thing the best I could. And anyways, so I quickly made a double take, though, to try to make sure what I had just read was correct. And immediately, you know, all those years and circumstances where I had heard mentions of this godsend, where I have heard mentions of A Course in Miracles, all those years where I procrastinated flashed before me. I said to myself with a warm, glowing feeling inside of me as I held on to this book, this is the actual book, and also to the book as I looked right at it, I said to myself, as if it had been looking for me, I said to myself, I said to the book, so this is what you are. This is what you are. I'm so glad to finally meet you. And of all places, how did you get here? I said to the book. Both elated and nervous, my hands were really shaking. And as I hugged this book in my arms, I was just, tears were coming out of were rolling down my face. I knew right then that whatever was contained within these pages was written for me. As it turned out, this copy was the condensed version with all 3 volumes included in one publication. Now, please keep in mind that A Course in Miracles is not a publication you would ordinarily find in prison, just, you know, as you would the Bible. The Bible is everywhere. Over there, there's a Bible sitting. There's a few of them over there. Anyone needs a Bible, it's accessible. But for some reason, A Course in Miracles is just not in prisons. But nevertheless, as I stood there in the library at the bookshelf where I met my new friend, I went to the copyright page to see that it was dated 1975. And this was the year my search for answers truly began, as I saw it. I quickly skimmed through it to catch glimpses of some of its wording and found it to be extremely deep and difficult to understand, like a foreign language. At least for now, I thought, resolving to learn this new language as best that I could. As I flipped through the book, just like this while standing there, as I flipped through the book, and eager and rushed, I was stopped at a section in smaller than normal print, which grabbed my attention. I stood there with tears in my eyes as I read the following, which seemed as though it were speaking to me. And here it is, and I'll read it. This course is a beginning, not an end. No more specific lessons assigned, for there is no need of them. Henceforth, hear but the voice for God. He will direct your efforts, telling you exactly what to do, how to direct your mind, and when to come to him in silence, asking for his sure direction and his certain word. This message then directed me to go to the workbook, page 487, and I did what it said. All I can say to you now is that the message I found there did tell me what to do. I examined the inside of the ragged and marked up cover, and I noticed that the book had been in the back section here. You could see where they put library, you know, those library things with the card in the back of there, which I took that out now because I was able to get this out of the library. But I noticed that on the card that was in there that the book had been received by the prison library 2 years prior to me getting there and had not once ever been checked out by another inmate. A name and phone number was written on the inside front cover by a woman from Sedona, Arizona, right here, but it's blacked out in magic marker by the prison people that did that before I got it, but I can read through that. I can read through that and see what it says. And by Sedona, Arizona, she left her phone number, and with her handwritten message, it said, "My will is that this finds its way to you." I figured the book had once belonged to her, and for some reason, maybe she had passed on or donated it to a charity. The writing seemed to be years old and made me think that it might have ended up in an estate sale or some kind of charitable sale for a social club or something like that. In any event, it somehow found its way across the country until it landed on my foot at that very time I was in critical need for it. In critical need for it to be with me. The condensed version, of course, of A Course in Miracles, for you that don't know of it, is the 669-page text and the 488-page workbook for students and the 92-page manual for teachers. And then there's a newer version that has the Song of Prayer. I immediately checked it out of the library and began to read each word of its deep content. At first, I found much of it difficult to understand, like I had already mentioned. Nothing seemed to make sense at all. However, I felt the words connecting to me in a very strange way. I just can't describe it. I felt I was being pulled towards something like light, like darkness drawn to light. But I also felt welcomed. What I was beginning to experience was both exciting and inexplicable. I knew to the core of me that for some strange reason, this publication was destined to show up in my life. Later, and still now, I have a sensation that A Course in Miracles was written for me. Among my many questions was, why didn't I find this sooner? Since then, I have found the simple answer to that question, which I easily accept. That answer is, I just wasn't ready. The Course was destined to show up in my life, there's no doubt, when I was ready, when the time was right. I immediately began to realize answers I'd been looking for and felt I was being pointed in the right direction with all I would encounter during my days in prison. Since this book was the library's only copy and not my own, I decided at first to quickly read it cover to cover without missing a word, regardless of what I did not understand. After all, I was in prison, and I had plenty of time to do just that, but I knew I would need to have my own personal copy eventually, because I had already accepted it as my life, a commitment that I wanted. I was not even aware if the book was still in print or available in stores, because in prison there is no computer where we can look things up, minimal telephone use, and so I had no idea about the Course if it was still sold in bookstores. But I needed to find out, and as a prisoner, like I said, there's zero lack of communication with zero computer. I initially thought of writing my longtime friend Ron, who had stuck by me by coming forward after I was sent to prison to offer his help to me in any fashion that he could. I thought that maybe Ron could find me a copy of A Course in Miracles, but there was one snag. If the Course was out of print and all he could find was a used copy, that wouldn't do. As a prisoner, and due to drug smuggling and all kinds of other reasons, I was only permitted to receive brand new books shipped to me directly from an approved vendor, such as like an Amazon.com or straight from a publisher. I decided to hold off for now on notifying Ron. In fact, I never did mention it to him at all, because I didn't want him to think that I'd gone overboard and fell for some kind of, my emotions had fallen for some kind of, save the day plan for myself. The timing wasn't right, and something was urging me to just see it that way. That pure thought again was kind of like trying to break through some cloud cover, the way I can see it now, just to hold tight and use the library's copy for now. Most people do not realize the importance of prisoners in having an outside support system, such as my friend Ron had helped me. And I continually thank Ron for all of his efforts in helping me through that horrific time. He had written me consistently each week, as a matter of fact, and our relationship as friends had grown so strong, it's unbelievable. He visited me as often as he could, even though he lived in Florida. But he would tell me that it gave him an excuse to check in on his 82-year-old mother, who lived in Ohio, not too far away from the prison where I was at. So one day I will repay Ron in a very special way. After about 3 months of renewing the course, this old version here from the prison library, I was feeling a oneness with these words. I asked the librarian who worked there as a state employee in this same library since the prison opened in 1995. Now, keep in mind, she was really just a guard, but that was her assigned duties, was the library. So she wasn't a real librarian like you would think. Us prisoners just called her the librarian, but she was a guard. And I asked her if she ever had heard of A Course in Miracles. In a very abrupt and authoritative, snappy fashion, she answered to me, "A course in what?" She had never heard of it, and she had said to me, "It's going to take more than miracles to get you out of here." I asked around among a few other inmates who I thought might be likely, maybe some of the more intellectual type inmates who might be likely to have maybe heard of it, and all of them answered no, they have never heard of A Course in Miracles. To this day, I have not run into, to this day, and thinking back while I was in prison, I had not run into a single individual in prison, in the prison system, who had ever heard of A Course in Miracles. I had to do something. At least I had to try to get a copy of the course, and even thought about asking the librarian if she would work with me somehow and to where I could get this copy. But somehow she wouldn't budge at that time. But somehow I waited and I remained patient for a little longer. She just simply was not going to give me this book because it was the library's, and I think she knew that I was so attached to it, she didn't want me to have it. Well, while at my bunk one morning reading and studying the age-yellowed, dirty, faded pages of the library's copy of the course, I was called to go to see the house sergeant. My request a few months prior for a bed move had finally came through, and I was being moved to a much quieter section of the prison house, to an area earmarked for what they called senior housing. And I had to get this book returned to the library right away because my time was up on it, and not returning a book to the library on time can warrant maybe 7 days in the hole, and that's not what I wanted to be up against. Well, I was being moved to an area earmarked in the prison for what they called senior housing, which I put in for a few months back to try to get that transfer. Senior housing was prisoners age 35 and older. At least I now would get a break from my bunkmate and all the other neighbors who were calling me Pops and old school. Well, upon arriving with my belongings at the new bunk location, A96, I plopped my property onto the mattress and steel springs of the bunk and greeted my new bunkie, who was taking a nap on the bunk there down below. I had a top bunk. Next to our double bunk was a rusty old wall locker, decorated with initials and dates back to the 1960s, scratched into the metal. Now, I know I had mentioned a little bit ago that the prison opened in 1995, but equipment from older prisons that had shut down was moved into newer prisons that opened, and I'm sure you can understand that. I would share this cabinet with my bunkie. I was on the top, he was down on the bottom. Bunkmates, top and bottom, and then right after us is 30 inches away is another double bunk, and so on and so on. The top of my half of the locker cabinet was terribly dusty, and I began to wipe it down. And I noticed what appeared to be, it looked like a thick book underneath a torn and dirty rag that was part of an old towel. As I removed the cloth, I was shocked to find a very clean and minimally tarnished copy of A Course in Miracles. This is that version here. I'm sure you can see the difference in the two copies. And this was the one, I picked it, I looked at it, I said, is this some kind of a joke? I said to myself. But I thought, but how could it be a joke? I asked under my breath. My voice was just shaking with utter confusion. Right away, I asked my new bunkie, who I didn't even get to know yet, if he was aware of the book's rightful owner. He simply shrugged and shook his head as he was trying to take a nap and turned his back to me. All he could tell me was that it had been sitting there for ages, and the previous occupant used it as a sort of a shelf where he placed his girlfriend's picture on it. The book was not used for reading material at all. It simply had been sitting untouched for God knows how long. I circled the bunk, asking all around with this in my hand. I circled around, does this belong to anybody? Holding it up high, whether anyone had misplaced it. Nobody would claim it. My new bunkie finally said to me, as he was raising his voice, half yelling at me, "Dude, give it up. Give it up, dude. I tell you, dude, it has been sitting there for a long time. Just keep it. Nobody wants that book. It's yours. Keep it." I cannot describe how I felt that day. I was shaking with anxiety and wonder. I had already been a student of the course for about 3 months now, and now this book suddenly appeared to end up becoming my own private personal copy. What I had done is I had decided to, later on, I had worked out a deal with the librarian, which was months later, to get this copy, this raggedy old copy. And with theft the way it is in prison, this old copy then from that point on would be for the remainder of the 8 years I was in prison. This would be the copy that I studied and read every day. My notes are all through this, this would be, so what I had done, this is the one I would have on my bunk where people would see me reading. So if it would get stolen from me, this would be the one that from the library. But this book here, I immediately borrowed a pen from a guard again, a magic marker, and put my name on the side of it again with my prison number, 542280, and I buried it in the bottom of my footlocker, way down deep, and put all my clothes on top of it. And this book sat at the bottom of my footlocker. This publication of A Course in Miracles, I'm just shaking right now just thinking about it. It sat in the bottom of my footlocker for the remainder of that 8 years while I was in prison. This was my insurance policy in case the other one was stolen, because it's just so bad and terrible in there. But it never happened that so this stayed there untarnished in the bottom of my footlocker. How did that book get into the prison system and onto that wall locker? As I mentioned earlier, the Bible is everywhere in this place of despair, hopelessness, and loneliness, and is widely used. But no one I ever met while in prison has ever heard of A Course in Miracles. Was this a miracle in itself? This publication showing up like it did, and with the events that put me there? I'll let you decide the answer to that question as you read on in my book, in both of these books. I hope you'll both get a copy of them, which are at my website. But for me, the Course is not just another how-to or self-help book or inspirational book that's going to help me to be positive in my day-to-day living. No, it's more than that. It has become my personal teacher for life. It doesn't replace the Bible, but it does add new thought when I wanted to add new thought to things that I read in the Bible, and has shown me how to open the window shade of my mind and let the light in. It allows me to open the window shade without forcing it up and allow the light to shine through naturally. I am being taught to relax, to be calm, and understand myself while knowing why I am here in this body. It took me by surprise, the hard way. But as I said earlier, it took till then for me to be ready. Many people have made comments that the Course is an attempt to form a cult. These individuals are totally misinformed. A Course in Miracles states right up front that it is not a cult, for a cult needs an idol, a leader, or a guru. Think about that. A Course in Miracles has no rules about dress or diet. It doesn't require you to leave your family or give it all your money, as you might expect from a cult. No, its curriculum focuses on truth and our sinless identity. It leads us to freedom from guilt and to a place where we can forgive one another and see fear as merely an illusion. And we can look at forgiveness as looking beyond our errors to the light that's really there. It teaches us that the opposite of fear is loving one another, and that both together cannot exist. It opens our true vision to our source, which can only be God. It helps us to know that we all have a unique purpose while we are here. The Course in Miracles gives us the guidance to understand how to proceed with that purpose. My lifelong commitment to studying and teaching the Course has opened a new door for me, unleashing a flow of universal inspiration that just seeds itself into my true essence. A gift had been given to me in my friend Ron, who would come to visit me there in that insane hell of a prison, supporting me, helping me, giving me updates as he worked with attorneys to do the tasks to set me free. Hopefully soon I will be able to thank Ron in a very, very generous way. And he already knows that. But I've always told myself that while I was in there, that if I had to endure the whole 10 years of prison, I was prepared to do it. After all, I had a lot of work to get done, and this kept me going. Let me add that I saw diving into the Course as my purpose, and that my stop there in prison was temporary and needed to be. I remember Ron saying while he was visiting me once in the prison visiting room that he had seen a glow about me. He had asked me about this change, but I didn't. After all, I was in prison, and he saw me glowing where everyone else is walking around in depression. But I did not expand to him about the Course because he just wasn't ready, is what I tell myself. But one day he will, and most likely will be when I can live outside the prison walls, is what I would tell myself. And today Ron knows the whole story, and he is just thrilled to death. These two books that I have authored right here, From the Volatile and Often Violent Din of the Cell Block, is about all of us as one together. It's about all of us. It's about us as one mind, also known as God. It's about forgiveness and inner peace. This book has a purpose. The Course does, and my two books also that I've written have a purpose to make you aware of the thought of God, which awakens us so we can sprout and shine our light, if you will. Not everyone is ready for the message that I give in my books, but many are. And I hope to make your life better only by continuing to show you what I have learned, and not by preaching to you. I'd rather do it by stories, true stories, like I'm talking to you now. That's my way of doing things. That's my way of extending my light to you. I have discovered truth, as the Course says, truth to be unalterable, eternal, and unambiguous. It applies to everyone and everything God created, and only what He created is real. The world offers us a flood of false images that we have been trained to believe that suit us. I want you to open your mind up to who you truly are, and to who I truly am as well. Aren't we together as one, truly? Yes, we are. I hope my books, if you decide to buy them, and my many blogs that I write, I hope that they will help you face the world with truth and strength, free of guilt, so you will be able to say, hey world, without your help, I am able to see my world the way I know it to be. I hope that you will discover in my book and my other books that are on their way out that will give you some momentum to proceed with an open mind, to see that you are more than what you've been giving yourself credit for. I hope you are thinking a lot about your own life and all the great gifts you have within yourself, and that you do indeed move forward at God's speed and increase this momentum by being more whole with everyone you encounter. And what is God's speed? That is the speed that God wants you to operate at. Nothing else. I hope it gives you the momentum by being more whole with everyone you encounter so that you begin living your true free will, your purpose for being who you are. Whenever you are tempted to undertake a useless journey that just doesn't seem to be right, meaning that might lead you away from your own natural light, remember what it is that you truly want and say these following words in the form of a prayer or meditation that I use. It's very simple, and it goes like this. These glimpses of reality lead me home, and where else would I rather go? What other need do I have other than to awaken and realize I am already at home? When our body dies, many like to say that the spirit goes somewhere, but isn't somewhere a place, though unspecified, which indicates a location? You know, we can contemplate the meaning of spirit till the end of time, always to be led back to spirit as thought. A thought certainly is of the mind, beyond the body, and is no place, but is everywhere rather than somewhere, if that makes sense. A Course in Miracles teaches that the mind represents the activating agent of spirit, supplying its creativeness. When the term mind is capitalized in its most vast sense, it means God. Spirit is the thought of God, which he created like himself. The unified spirit is God's one child, or Christ, if you will. You will learn through my book, The Master of Everything, a story of mankind in the world of illusions we call life. You will learn through this book that because the human mind has split itself between man-made illusion and spirit, often not really realizing which is which, but it can process thought either right or wrong-mindedly, depending on the voice it listens to, the Spirit of God or the dreaming ego. It's your choice. The goal of this book and my other books has always been to strike a chord within you and open your right side. You open your right side of the split mind to bring it forward in your expressions of life so you can begin to see what others continue to deny. I want to encourage you to go yet deeper into right-mindedness. You'll find out what that is when you read my books. And if you're already a long-time student of the Course, then you know what it is. But I want you to go deeper into that right mind where you will experience the bridge that's guiding you to the true knowledge of yourself, which is the universe. I say universe because you are all that exists. You are all that exists. Without you, nothing can exist. It wasn't till my 5th year of serious daily involvement in the Course, while yet still in prison, that I struck a chord within myself. Suddenly it seemed, although really it was a gradual process, now that I look back, but I realized I was actually making decisions and thinking as the Holy Spirit, that thought of God, which is God's light in us all, which means His Holy Spirit is who we are in our right-minded nature, feeling the urges, and in my own right-minded nature, and I was feeling the urges to be all I could be while I'm here on earth, especially while I was operating from that prison environment. Oh, sure, I still always, even to this day, hear the ego in me, but in the background now, just trying to rush me and fill me with anxiety. But even making its best efforts now, the ego can only weak knee itself forward, and it quickly gets ushered by truth to a back row seat in my mind, where it settles down. The vast percentage of my mind is no longer concerned with outcome. The process itself in anything I pursue is what creates the joy in me, which I'm able to extend. I feel completion in this, and that's why many of my other videos where I don't mention the Course that much, but I mention about doing things that extend joy in you. That's my way of spreading the word. One day while I was writing an outline for my second book, for this one, while still in prison, I looked up from my writing tablet and said to myself, that's it. All those past years of my life, my separated dreaming mind had been signaling my brain what to see, hear, think, do, and experience, while my real, unseparated, non-dreaming, fully awakened mind continued to shine its light. I was sending, it was sending messages, if you will. I did know this all along, of course, but now it hit me in a new way, acknowledging that my brain is just like programmed hardware that runs and regulates my body. That's it. The projected images replay from my innermost thoughts and become my life. For me, this insight was a revelation. Now I can accept the magnitude of my mind. My fear of death is minimal now, and even that is only due to my ego's occasional background chatter, which I recognize as unreal. I know that all decisions that spring from illusions or wrong-mindedness are consciously made and then acted upon in the false universe, or the physical world, we can call it. But the light of the real, unseparated mind shines through to tell me that everything is fine, that I need to just relax and trust and keep on writing. I agree wholeheartedly with a fan of mine, a fabulous woman named Mary Ann Williamson. I agree wholeheartedly with Mary Ann, a lovely woman who is a best-selling author that also writes along these lines. That the Course, that Mary Ann says, the Course may sound absolutist or unyielding, but one of its saving graces is that it claims to be only one version of a true universal curriculum. That saves the day right there whenever you're questioned by anyone, is the Course trying to be a cult? But the Course generally endorses the world's other spiritual and psychological paths for their innate wisdom. But what does this really do? It teaches us that where communication exists, so do peace and love and forgiveness. That's from Mary Ann Williamson, and I just love that paragraph because it sets me free when I just tell myself that the Course doesn't declare to be absolutist. No. In my sequel, this book here, Mastering Your Own Spiritual Freedom, you will come to form your own understanding as to why Jesus really entered the dream of separation, or what we call this world, as we've been projecting it. As we've been projecting it, he was born into this world to teach us the true condition of love. But some of us have projected it wrong-mindedly, but that's okay. This is good, right-minded projection, though, that when we see that Jesus' purpose in this world was to extend love, teaching us that communication remains unbroken or unseparated, even if the body is destroyed, provided that you don't see the body as the most necessary means of communication. By grasping this lesson, you will realize that to sacrifice the body or anything material is really to sacrifice nothing, because the body is nothing. With this understood, you'll have a vision that communication is of the mind, which cannot be sacrificed. It's impossible. This book here, Mastering Your Own Spiritual Freedom, will open you up to real freedom by your own interpretation, not based on rules derived from fear. Now, here are the first two books, but in book 3 of this series, also written from prison, which is now just in its final phase of editing and will be released, I'm hoping, October 1st of 2016. In book 3 of this series, you will learn that the only way we can give of our mind is to extend it, and this will mean true joining. This is why I've titled my third book, And Then I Knew My Abundance. Sacrifice is proven unreal, just another wrong-minded attempt to keep you devoted to the false idea of fear. Instead, And Then I Knew My Abundance invites you to experience the abundance that is the signature of your true free will, the life that you deserve. The Holy Spirit has whispered truth into your dreaming mind about your next move. I'll end here by asking you to consider one more question, please. With all this understood, where now will your life take you while on this planet? I hope you'll join me in my subsequent books in the Master of Everything series. I offer you all I can be, and I have tremendous faith in the real you. Thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you so much for listening to me, and God bless you.